Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our City Council meeting. This is a committee of the whole for Monday, February 1st, 2021. This meeting is being held in accordance with the requirements of the Iowa Public Information Board for electronic meetings due to the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. So in this session tonight, we have a 60-minute presentation from Public Works Director Chase Schrage on the Main Street traffic study. So without further ado, I'll turn the floor over to you, Director Schrage.
Thank you, Mayor. Some of you may recall a corridor study that was done on Main Street in 2017. And that was done by Cedar and Associates. Based on the goal setting in November, the council decided that they would like to hear that information from the traffic study again from the consultant. So tonight we have with us Mark Parrington and Wade Griman with Cedar and Associates, and they will kind of run through the data and analysis, and then ultimately the recommendation that was provided by them. So I'll turn it over to you, Mark.
All right, can you hear me okay? Okay. All right, let me get the PowerPoint going. Okay, should have the introduction screen for all of you.
Looks great.
All right, good evening. Again, Mark Parrington with Cedar and Associates, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Give you an update here. Got about, well, there's about 30 slides altogether, so hopefully get through this 20-25 minutes, and then if not quicker, and really try to get the opportunity up for questions and answers discussion for all of you. Go that direction. This study, as we said, is an update to this presentation is an update to the study we did. Really, we worked on that back in 2016, in the summer and fall of 16, and the spring of 17, and then we brought it before council with a couple presentations in the summertime of 17. For those who don't recall. And essentially, a little bit south of Searly, North University, south of Searly, somewhere in there. On up, all the way up north to 6th Street, tying it in with what is really just finishing up here soon with the downtown streetscape updates. So that was most of our area. The history of the corridor. It's been a 4-lane undivided road for quite some time now. And really up until 1993, it was Iowa DOT control when it was Highway 58. On the last, some of the last major maintenance work, there's been some patching done, but really was an overlay done in 2003. Back in that time, there were some discussions about, okay, when the major overlay work was going on, maybe are there some different ways to address the corridor with some safety and operational concerns. So, the primary reasons behind this is that we knew going into it was that, well, the corridor is in, disrepair with the pavement, the asphalt's old, aging, and the problem is just really the sub base, what's underneath it. It's just so old. You can kind of keep putting a new top on it, but it deteriorates very quickly as we go through the freeze-thaw cycles of the winter. And so it's getting that point of diminishing return. You just can't keep putting the little patches over it and get much life out of them. Some other things that are going on in the corridor is the street lights, they're needing replacement. Again, they've been there for a long time. Some of the bases, are getting rust and concerns with corrosion there. And there's some other things with utilities underneath the corridor. Water main, I know at times, there's some repairs needed there. Again, it's getting old. And the various types of sewer between storm sewer and sanitary sewer. So when we worked on the 2017 traffic study, because this total reconstruction was being discussed at the time, we felt, well, this is an opportunity. If you're going to go in there and remove all the pavement and the curbs and old sidewalk, this is the perfect time to ask ourselves, what do we want to do with the corridor? How do we want it to behave for the next 25, 30, even 40 years? And so there was an opportunity there to, look at safety and operations, consider these types of alternatives. We did the typical traffic study approach. We gathered, fresh count information, safety information, all of these types of things. We had a couple public input meetings. So we were able to share a lot of ideas with the neighbors in the area, the business owners, as well as the residential neighborhood. And it was nice. We got a lot of interaction and input with those folks. And then we really just wanted to come up with a corridor plan. Our charge at the time we worked on this, and it's still the case, we wanted to consider all travel modes in the corridor and really try to look at, what the current land use as well as future land use. Some background for you on traffic as a reminder. The corridor, as expected, as the community grew and it was still the highway corridor, it was, really on an uphill climb. Traffic was really growing, but then really, as you see there, I've called out 58, the bypass, however you want to call it, got built in the corridor. And immediately when that got renamed, traffic moved over, higher, more efficient roadway in its use. And so you can see how the traffic just dropped off. There was just an immediate drop off in traffic from Main Street. That traffic diverted. And then really what we've seen is kind of a steady, these are just count increments. The DOT helps do traffic counts for all the communities. And so you have these count increments of about every 4 years, but we've seen really just a steady traffic in there, right around kind of that 10,000 line or a little under. It varies a little bit in the corridor from one end to the other. It gets a 1,000 or so more, but generally speaking, we're kind of in this, 10,000 range as we look at the corridor. So we've really been on that plateau for well over 20 years now. Other key aspect of it is talking about safety in the corridor. Back when we did the study, you see this first column here, the data we looked at the time was a 5-year period, 11 to 2015. You can see total crashes, what crashes, what do we have with injuries associated with them? And you can see comparables. We had the opportunity here with giving this a new look. It's a good thing to see is that crashes have gone down over the last 5 years as a whole. I don't have the year by year for you here, but that's a good thing. Still kind of getting injuries in there, with the corridor one to the other. And what's key is we look at the types of crashes: rear ends, broadside crashes, meaning kind of a right angle crash at an intersection or a driveway, and side swipes. So. And this graphic shows you those crashes all through the corridor. So just Searles over here on the left, 6 on the right, north going from left to right. Top to bottom is just that first crash period and the second crash period. So it just gives you that idea of, I don't think you should be too surprised by this, but these tallest stacks where the greatest frequency is, those are the intersections, the signalized intersections through the corridor. We have the most conflicting traffic at those points, as well as the traffic signals and some, lack of turn lanes. So that's where we tend to get our most crashes in the corridor. Some other background for the corridor as we went into it at the time. This was this is, or still is, as I understand it, this is kind of the current bike committee plan, the ad hoc committee to the council and to the staff that, this area zoomed in on recommendations they had made about trying to provide comprehensive bike network in the community. And within that, what you see really to focus on is, that dash blue, right up through the middle there, that's Main Street. And one of the things that group identified was, a desire and a recommendation to try bike lanes, on-street bike lanes, if the timing, would work right for that possibility in the corridor, makes sense with a cross section to do that. So that was kind of another key input into what we were doing at the time when we worked on this. So then we look at, we always talk about with our corridor, where do we think traffic is going? And what you see in there is the tail end of that chart I showed you earlier, where, traffic kind of steady or declining a little bit through the corridor in here in that 10,000 range I mentioned. And then what we did is, the community's part of INTERCOG, the regional council of governments, and looking at their travel demand model and what information they had. And, again, consistent with kind of the land use and not a lot of new change, really more density. It was more about, things are certainly updating and turning over, but overall, not a lot of empty land that can be turned into land that generates traffic. And so you see this light blue dash here, the lower line. That was kind of the forecast, which again was somewhat of just a flat line out to 20 plus years. And what we did with our study is we decided, well, what if we even, put some growth on it? It wasn't a lot, but we put some growth on it. So when we did our analysis, we even tried to say, well, what if the traffic growth is even a little higher than the regional model projects? What you do see that I tried to put on here for a frame of reference for you is these kind of couple of square dash lines up above are what we call the capacity. If a person had a 4-lane corridor like it is today, what type of volume, if we had a demand of 18 to 22,000 vehicles a day, could we serve that through the corridor? And yes, you could. It's just that our demand is down in that 10 to 11,000 range. And then below that line, you see one that's called a 3-lane. So really kind of a 2 through lanes with a center turn lane. That has a capacity that we use in just a very simple planning terms of about 15,000 to 16,000 vehicles a day. So that kind of gives you a frame of reference of where are we with traffic, where do we think it'll be going, somewhere in this range in the future, or even if for some reason there'd be some changes in land use that would really generate a lot more traffic. If it would grow at a more rapid rate, you can see that these alternatives we're going to talk about, either one of them, it would help serve the traffic volume demand. So then what we did with the corridor is we talked about alternatives, that we presented to the public and what kind of seemed like the obvious choices in the corridor, given, again, the existing land use, not a lot of change going on with those land uses. And really, we had three basic alternatives. There was kind of the 4-lane throughout, really no different than it is today. A second alternative was, what if we develop a 3-lane through the corridor, which again, one through lane in each direction with a center turn lane. And then a third alternative that came out of some discussion, and given the nature of the land use with the residential area, kind of from really the heaviest residential between 18th and 6th, was what if we had a 3-lane south of 18th where we have a little more commercial activity, but perhaps north of 18th, what if you had a boulevard in the middle? If we don't really need the travel lane of that idea. So graphically, now to help remind you, what does that look like? There's essentially the 4-lane through the corridor, the 4 basic 2 through lanes in each direction. And it isn't exactly the same all the way through, but generally speaking, there's about 80 feet of right-of-way through the corridor. It gets a little narrower. I believe it's at the south end. It actually gets a little narrower in a few places. But, you have these are your through lanes, and then you have that little bit of buffer, and then you tend to have a 4-foot sidewalk, on both sides of the corridor. So we just tried to represent that with, there's an alternative to just put back the same thing. Pros and cons for that. There's plenty of capacity for the traffic flow demand we have, is that chart I just showed you, where, that's more than ample demand. There is a small element, as we looked at in the corridor, up in that north end of the corridor, there's some on-street parking for churches that tends to occur on Sunday or other religious holidays. That demand is pretty small because it's just not a lot of parking stalls that you can, put cars parallel parked on the street. Any given block, there was maybe 5 or 6 stalls, as I recall. Some cons to that alternative, it doesn't really help our safety. That same 4-lane cross section, it has certain safety operational problems. And then, there's been some concerns with signal operations and inefficiencies at those with the split phase signal at 12th. And then if you're wanting to look at the on-street dedicated bike lanes per the plan, there isn't, you can't really incorporate that in. You can't have 4 travel lanes and squeeze the bike lanes in unless you're going to move those curbs out farther, which there just isn't room to do that. So then alternative 2 that I mentioned, the 3-lane throughout, here you see basically a same cross section of curb to curb So you kind of have the same width, but it's how you reallocate that space for a through lane in each direction, a two-way left turn lane, center turn lane in the middle. And then really what you get is that bike lane area over on the side, where you have the gutter area, you have drainage when you do have storm events, but you see how the bike lanes fit in there. And then you still have the buffer space, and with a newer project, reconstructing sidewalk would be widened out to 5 feet instead of 4 feet as a minimum. But it's how it fits in the same space, if you will. And there's a lot of details to still look at with a design, but there's potential in here to even narrow this down a little bit more, a few feet. So there's some potential that that could tighten up a little more, which would save on some cost with construction having to be placed or concrete. Pros with that, there's a lot more pros we get with the 3-lane. We get it's proven facts for a lot of years now. We get a lot more safety with that. We get rid of a lot of crashes that we have with the 4-lane. We get a much better speed consistency through the corridor. That was something that we did get some feedback from neighbors. That with that 4-lane, and because we're not very busy out there, people have the ability to pass people, go around and accelerate, and so you get a lot of speed variation. We have more than ample capacity. Again, if you remember, I told you about 15 to 16,000 a day, and our demand now is in that 10,000 range. And even if we grow, we think it's only going to be, maybe in the 12,000 range. So again, ample capacity to handle the traffic. We separate that left turning traffic and through traffic, which is a good thing. That's our safety benefit. We can make the 12th Street signal operate in a little better fashion. And the other thing is, for any pedestrian crossings in there, we can actually help that pedestrian crossing. Pedestrians, it's easier to navigate when you're only dealing with the 2 through lanes. The center turn lane isn't per se a place for pedestrians to stand, but it does give them kind of a separated area out there as needed. And there's some enhanced treatments we could do. So that helps out, and it presents that opportunity for the bike lanes. Some cons, we get a little bit of delay in that you go to a single through lane, again, as you look at some of these other intersections. And then we have the comment I made about where we get a little bit of that parking. There'd either need to be the decision about no parking in there, or I have seen elements used that, because the conflict is typically so small and such off times, where you do still allow parking, vehicles can park kind of in that gutter bike lane area, and then through traffic can still get around them. Okay, so something to keep in mind. That last alternative that we came up with was the idea, some people brought up the ideas about, well, if we don't really need a lot of turn lane, is it possible to have a median in the middle that, there could be perhaps some landscaping? And that just shows you that cross section with that same idea that you basically use the same space to, to put all the traffic lanes in and the boulevard idea. What I've highlighted for you, the darker items kind of at the bottom parts of the pro and con, it's what's different. The center turn lane, well, we don't have as much need as we get up in the residential area because there really aren't as many driveways. There's very few driveways. It's just block to block street intersections. And, you have that ability, you have a middle island, you have the opportunity for an aesthetic improvement in the neighborhood, if you will. Cons, some of it is, if you wouldn't do bike lanes, once you have that median in the middle, you still have to kind of have the same wider area, because we need things like the ability for a car pulled over to stop just to maybe let somebody out for a home, or if you have emergency vehicles, you've still got to have greater width so a fire truck, police could pass a regular vehicle that pulls over to get out of their way. There's some delay if we don't have the left turn lanes at the intersections as we go block to block through there, of a left turner not kind of getting out of the way if you have that island. And, it goes without saying the landscaping can be nice, but it does create a maintenance effort to what's going on out there. And the other thing would be, if you put that boulevard out there, there are about 10 access points that, they then get blocked for a full movement. They become a right in, right out. So in summary, 2 and 3, it accommodates more modes when we talk about everybody better and pedestrians and bicycle traffic. It increases the safety in the corridor. It's a proven fact for 20 plus years, even longer now, with 4-lane to 3-lane conversions. Helps that speed consistency. It has a way to just kind of meter itself, which really helps police enforcement out there. We can improve the traffic flow at some of the intersections, and then we really get similar delays, if not better, with the rest of the corridor and what's going on. And there'll always be opportunities in there, we believe, for some aesthetic things, that are opportunities to not exactly continue the downtown that same, but some other things you could do through there. The major intersections, we believe there's roundabout feasibility at all the key ones, Searly, 18th, and 12th, and really to replace the signals. And the key to some of that is some refined layout needed to really look at right-of-way and utility impacts. Public input. We had a couple meetings, as we mentioned. We had a first meeting that talked about some of the existing information, and we talked to the neighborhood and got their mood and feeling on things. And then we had a secondary meeting when we came back and showed them the things we came up on. I would comment, as we're going to talk about our recommendations and talk about things like roundabouts. The timing of this was, as I remember, I think at that point in time, roundabout for the community, there was the one down off of Technology, I think. I think I'm saying that right. It was Technology down to the south. And that was the only roundabout in place at the time. University at this point in time was being discussed, options looked at, and moving into construction. So, you didn't have people, your community wasn't quite as used to, just driving a roundabout and seeing, how do they behave? How do they perform? What are the benefits of them? So the 4-lane to 3-lane, to remind you again, we get a very definite proven crash overall reduction with these, anywhere to 20 to almost 50%. I mentioned the speeding, calming traffic, rear end and left turn crashes go down. We tend to help side street crashes because you're only negotiating one traffic lane in a direction if you're making say a left turn exiting movement out of a driveway or a side street. Helping out with pedestrians. Have an opportunity here for the bicycle facilities. So a lot of things that we think, makes this, it just fits the nature of the corridor and what it is now and going forward. So to focus in on a couple of the intersections, or the 3 intersections where probably there's the biggest impact. Here's Searly, and what we're showing you left to right, hope you can see that well, is just the ideas of what you see in some purple and yellow lines up here is if you convert to the 3-lane, how that kind of lays in there. You have a lining lefts and a single through lane, and you see it's kind of narrow, but you see the bike lane to the outside. This is some new sidewalk, that purple in the upper corner there. And then what we're trying to show you too is here's kind of an early concept roundabout, a single lane roundabout, how that would work in the intersection. It's much more efficient than the traffic signal, given, I think, here we have about any given time, 10,000 vehicles a day going north-south, and we have probably 3,000 to 4,000 vehicles east-west. The big thing is on the south side of the intersection, we have the box culvert that carries, conveys the creek underneath. So you can see there's some issues there, but Director Schrage got us information on, currently it's in pretty good structural shape, so it would just require some modifications to add on in order to serve that area. And a point I would make is that on the south side, you see these yellow lines here. So this is really city right of way. So that kind of, widening down there doesn't require getting in a private right of way, and it would help us to try to, we can still work on some positioning of this to mitigate any right of way, in these upper corners with the commercial development in the northwest and northeast. So then we look at 18th, and we, again, showing you a similar, here's this 3-lane corridor, more typical of what we do through the intersection, just kind of if you were to keep it signalized. And then over here, you see the roundabout layout. Again, we're fortunate at this intersection in that the only corner that isn't city right away is the southeast corner. Over here, I believe pharmacy and some other businesses in this corner. So again, we have some opportunity. You know, the fire station today is in the northeast corner, but as we understand, you know, there's long-term of that moving. So any concerns with that, we can make that work. And we believe the other corners, you know, again, we can do that. And you can see how really when you start talking about the lanes of a roundabout and single lane roundabout handling the traffic, what it can do is help to just really soften up some of these areas with all the extra pavement isn't as needed. And so, you know, again, some opportunity for treatment at the intersections and kind of have that look a little nicer. 12th Street, again, things get a little tighter. Here, you know, you have the city fitness center over here in the corner, you know, so you have the right of way there, but the other corners, I believe we have 2 properties over here that serve as rental uses, you know, and with apartments in these corners on the west side, and one more building over here in the northeast. I don't know on the latest check. I believe single family residential, but so you can see the roundabout does require a little bigger footprint, but it can, you know, help really serve this intersection in a much more efficient manner. And what's going on out there. So we wanted to just kind of show you those footprints because, you know, don't want to hide behind that fact that the roundabout, you know, as you've seen and had many of them built now in your community, you know, they're very much a different thing in the kind of footprint you get, but a lot of benefits of safety and efficiency in the way they operate. So just to sum up a few things, you know, the big thing we looked at, well, how do these things work over time? And, you know, this is in minutes and seconds, but we just looked at from one end to the other, and that's where I circled these main things. You know, the improvements aren't huge. They really come down to maybe about 30 seconds, you know, 20 seconds throughout the various times of the day, but it does work more efficiently as far as just traveling through the corridor. The main reason we don't see a more robust improvement on that is really because the corridor isn't being stretched in its demand today. You know, we're not overloaded with traffic or something where we'd see a more dynamic change. The other thing is we presented to you, if anybody remember me talking about Green Hill, when we looked at Green Hill, we talked about, well, comparing more of a life cycle cost, not just a construction cost right up front, but over time, you know, over the life of the project, 20, 25 years, how do these intersections cost out? And what we do is we look at, you know, we start, the construction of it, but then how do we start saving in crashes and travel time, fuel, pollutant emissions of people idling at an intersection, and then even the maintenance that goes into it. And these just focus on the 3 intersections and show you the comparative. The brownish orange color in the middle, kind of the largest block in any of them, that's that travel time, which really is most pertinent to you know, users driving through the corridor, and you know that really adds up over time. So when I said, you know, it may only be a 20-second, 30-second improvement, the thing is over time and everybody going through there, 10,000 vehicles a day, it adds up. So you can see that what really shows in these is that the third item over in each one, 12th Street intersection, 18th intersection, Searly intersection, is that the roundabout in the 3-lane serves the best, performs the best, you know, when we look at it as an annual cost. And then what we lump together is if you just look at the whole corridor from Searly all the way to 6th, and you go with that alternative, which is 3-lane with roundabouts, and, you know, it doesn't look like a big dynamic change in the bars here. You can see that it's, you know, a small difference if it's existing 4-lane with signals versus 3-lane with signals. But the 3-lane with roundabout, what that really equates to in our estimates is, you know, about this $500,000 a year in annual user cost. So really over the life of the project, we're talking anywhere from 10, you know, to 11 million approximated over that 20-year life. And the project is somewhere, you know, 8-9 million in total cost. So it's almost like you're recouping I know we don't always think of projects that way, but it's kind of like you're recouping the savings with this, alternative of 3-lane with roundabouts. Funding opportunity, we think this corridor is a good one. The DOT did an overall statewide review of 4-lane to 3-lane corridors, and this one was identified, even though it's not a state route. They looked at corridors. It was identified as a candidate for a 4-lane to 3-lane. And I've been involved in these things for 25 years at least, and it's a perfect candidate in my mind. And then the Traffic Safety Improvement Program, which is a funding program through the DOT, roundabouts, 4-lane to 3-lane conversions, they score very well, and that can be upwards of. There's the potential with an application of up to 500,000. The main thing that we might have an opportunity is whether they'd allow us to split the corridor into some pieces, because I know that's the talk of how to get it constructed. We're not sure if they might just look at it as one big project. So they might limit us to one app. But again, we think there's a good opportunity for additional funding to be brought to the project with this type of alternative. Schedule. Chase asked me to add this in, on just to give you kind of a time frame. Design and right of way getting going here in this fiscal year coming up July 21, and then the construction per the CIP. The idea of it's fiscal year 23 through fiscal year 25, and within that, the community's been successful in securing the STBG federal funding, from your intercog group. There's about 2.9 million already, allocated and set aside to the project. So. Bottom line, our recommendation, finish this up here for you. Our recommendation, 3-lane corridor. This gives us enhanced safety over the 4-lane, which we think above all else is the most important thing to consider. Reduces all those conflict points, speed, consistency. And again, we think it really kind of creates a corridor that is very consistent with what the overall neighborhood is, whether it be the residential area from 18th North, or kind of the mixed residential and commercial at the south end of the corridor. The on-street bike lanes consistent with the plan that has been previously recommended, 6 to Searly and kind of a tie-in with University there, and then roundabouts at all 3 of the signalized intersections. And then the other thing would be the last recommendation is we definitely pursue that DOT traffic safety funding to, again, leverage some more dollars into the project for the community. So, lot said there. I can go back to any slides. We have some other slides that came up from questions before. I'd be open to now really just try to answer any questions for you folks. Wade and I can try to do those, or along with Chase and so on. So, thank you.
Mr. Farrington. I'll open it up for council discussion then. So, who'd like to start us off?
Mayor, if I can.
Yes, Councilmember Miller, go ahead.
This is for Chase, I think, more so, or maybe David Wicke. But when we first started looking at this, why did we not look at 6th Street as well as part of the corridor? Was there a reason for that, or did we just need to specify something different?
I'm not sure. Stephanie may have some insight as she kind of led the study at the time, but the limits that were established, I believe, Mark, did you guys collect data at 6th?
We have some information at 6th. It's a good question. We looked at it, and at the time as we were looking at the 3-lane, it kind of ties in quite well with what you have there, and with the street cross section coming down from the north out of the downtown streetscape. And so it really got less focus than the other intersections. The demands I know are much lower on the traffic. Very tight right away in the southwest corner with the Casey's there. But there could be some opportunities to probably look if it was so wish. But I know not quite as many crashes, just some other things that it didn't resonate as much, requiring additional look.
Thanks. I guess my reason for I don't have any problem with the roundabouts. The 3-lane I think is obvious, clearly in terms of safety, is an improvement for us here, and but as well, 6th Street's kind of an awkward intersection the way it sits and some of the turning movements. So if we're looking at a roundabout potentially at Searly too, I think a roundabout at 6th Street would be terrific heading into the parkade. But Obviously, there's costs and all the rest of it to consider there, but much like University Avenue, I mean, we have to consider changing a corridor here too, and where it's worth considering at this point with the total reconstruction of the road. So, thank you.
Other questions, comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cruz, go ahead.
I like the roundabouts. I really enjoy them, I guess you'd say. I can see they reduce accidents and that sort of thing. The thing I'm concerned with, if we went to page 10 with the bike network highlights, if we can do that.
Yeah, I'll bring that back up. Let's see. Yeah, bear with me. Come on, there it is.
Okay. If we look at this closely, we have the red is established trails along the creek and I guess some railroad tracks possibly, but a very picturesque area for families and people to bicycle and enjoy the weekend and that sort of thing. You got Clay Street that's got 2 dedicated bike lanes existing. State Street has a shared lane, and then we're redoing Washington Street as well coming up here. I find it, I don't know, concerning that we are going to put a lot of effort into taking away traffic lanes to put in a bike lane when we already have 2, 3, 4 bike lanes already in about 6 blocks, and we're adding 2 more. And I just wonder, because I look at the alternatives. Have we looked at putting roundabouts in on the 4 lane so that we spread out traffic, smooth it, and then implement that option? I think that would be, in my mind, the best fit, because I've had people come to me and say things like, they have elderly parents and they drive slow and they're going to increase the congestion on a 1-lane road when there's not an opportunity to pass. And they say that the traffic will go as fast as the slowest person moving. And then you're implementing boulevards in that turning lane that takes away the opportunity for left-hand turns. I counted 33 different opportunities for driveways and businesses from, I think it was Searly down to 6th. You're mentioning 10, but I know there's dramatically more than 10. So I look at the bike situation. I've done a lot of biking across the United States, a couple times on a lot of ragbris. And have we incorporated any bike accidents into the study and the statistics? I know, for example, I was in Denver, Colorado, and they do a lot of the bike lanes, road diets. And oftentimes you have a vehicle making a right-hand turn with a bike lane right next to them, and they pretty much ignore the biker coming down. And a bike accident with a vehicle it can be a fatality pretty quickly. So we may be improving the statistics for crash on the corridor, but we got to incorporate problems with the bike accidents. And I've seen, and I have to say I've done it myself, is I'll be texting while I'm bicycling. I've seen a lot of people do that. It's very common. They feel like I'm going really slow. I can answer my phone and talk on my phone and that sort of thing. So we got a situation there where we got to protect the bike lane from the traffic, but we have Clay Street and State Street, and we can put a bike lane on Washington, I think safer than what you're describing here. I just have a big concern with that. And then I guess one other component is the response time for emergency vehicles going down through here. If we got a boulevard and a big part of that, there's not opportunity for an emergency vehicle to get around a person or a person to get out of the way. So like I said, when I started speaking, I like the roundabouts, but I like keeping a 4-lane and then put the bike lanes on the side streets. I myself prefer to bike, less cars whisking past my shoulder. We've got nice green space bike trails to utilize for the commuters, for the recreational bikers, and then the people that want to race. All the streets are legal anyway to go racing down with a bicycle. So those are some of my thoughts off the top of my head here. So I guess I'm curious, particularly in the bike lanes, why we have to put them in there.
Ace, I can try to address some of those points if you'd like me to start.
Yes,
Sure.
please, Mr. Barrington.
Okay. Okay. As far as the 4-lane with the roundabouts, as I mentioned, we don't. If I can, let me just go to one of those. Yeah, there we go. Here's down at Surly as an example. Well, the 4-lane. If we bring the 4-lane in, we certainly could. But our capacity, the efficiency of a roundabout, we don't need multi-lane roundabouts. We don't need a roundabout with 2 lanes all the way around it at an intersection. And so I think the key is, and that would require even a bigger footprint than the circle you see here. So I think that would be one aspect, that if you maintain the 4-lane and wanted to continue that consistency through the roundabout, you would have even a bigger footprint at each of those intersections with the roundabout. The other thing is, certainly single-lane roundabouts, what we have found is they perform, if the demand is appropriate, level of demand needed to get through it. What you don't have versus dual-lane roundabouts is some of the people going through and trying to go together, maybe a little bit of side swiping, things of that nature. So given the traffic demands at these intersections, single lane roundabouts are all that we need, if you will. Also, in related to the 4-lane, in discussing the boulevard, I want to clarify a couple things with that. We only considered the boulevard from 18th Street north to 6th. It was kind of a hybrid option. I may not have made that clear. From Searly up to 18th, there's a lot more commercial driveways, throughout the corridor. So that we were a 2-way left turn lane, center turn lane with single lanes, no matter what. No boulevard through there. And then,
Could I ask a quick question on this
Yeah.
schematic here? Where do you put the bike lanes? I see the crosswalks, but the bike lanes, I don't see them shown there in the bike or in the.
right. With bike lanes, usually with the roundabout, they come along the side of the roundabout, they feed into it where they normally are. And then usually there's a ramp type access where then you take the bicyclist up and adjacent to, if you will, and look for a similar crossing is the way you do those. You still kind of separate them a little bit at the intersection in how they behave and go through the intersection. So that's how that would work with the roundabout. But the boulevard, the only thing we considered was from 18th up to 6th because of the residential nature of the neighborhood. I've got a drawing I could share that's where we consider it because we really didn't have many driveways. So when I said 10 accesses, that's only from north of 18th to a point south of 6th. Because we knew in there we have a lot of alley access to a lot of those homes, and so they don't even have a driveway to turn left into. It's really mostly just block by block you're turning.
I counted, I thought 20 some in there, but I don't know how far past 18th I went. I don't think I did, but regardless,
yeah,
you're looking here. There's no sidewalks shown here, but I guess the bike lane and the sidewalk could be one and the same to get through this intersection, as opposed to staying on some of the other trails.
Well, as far as if you were to have bike lanes in the corridor,
right?
That's your question. Yeah. Again, the bike lanes, the treatment is, your sidewalks would be out there regardless, and helping pedestrians. I know we don't have them sketched into that, but they would be out here and guiding you to those crosswalk points. What we do with the bike lanes is again, we bring those into the roundabout, but again, we tend to kind of separate them, and you bring them up on a ramp and then bring them through on the outer, like the sidewalks, to help separate them, from the traffic, from the vehicular traffic in the intersection.
Mark, if I could,
Go ahead, Wade.
I'll just add a little bit to it from a geometry standpoint. As Mark was saying, and I don't have the cursor control, but as you're heading northbound on your bike, in that bike lane, you would exit the roadway in a ramp prior to hitting that first crosswalk as you're approaching.
Right.
And you would enter onto a wider sidewalk section, probably 10 to 12 feet. That 10 to 12 feet would essentially be the same footprint and circumferential of the roundabout intersection itself. And then once those bikers go back onto the street on the opposite leg, that sidewalk would be narrowed down to a more traditional 5 to 6 foot width.
And you go
if
right
that
back
makes
in.
sense. Yeah.
So you said bikes on the street though, but I thought we were looking at a dedicated bike lane, not on the street.
Yes, we would have, the bike lane is adjacent to the street, but it's still at the same street level as the three
Right.
lanes. And then the bicyclists would exit that bike lane and onto almost like a side path
At the roundabout, a slip
Yeah.
lane, I think, don't they call them slip lanes?
Yeah.
Of sorts?
Yeah.
I'd like to make sure we also get to other council member questions too, but I'd certainly be happy to come back to Councilmember Cruz if we have additional time at the end. Councilmember Sires, I saw you had your hand up earlier, so what was your question or comment?
Yeah, let me go.
Oh, we got you muted right now, so you were unmuted earlier. There
All
you
right,
are.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a concern over the costs, and why don't we have cost estimates on all these different projects? Because there's got to be millions of dollars of difference between all these fancy roundabouts compared to just rebuilding as what we have and upgrading our infrastructure underneath. I can't imagine a tremendous amount of more cost. And in a time to be a little bit frugal, might be nice to know exactly what kind of price difference we're talking about, because to me it looks like many $1 million. That's my question.
Is that something that can be estimated prior to a design accurately?
I think Wade might have some of that information.
I do. I was going to ask you if you wanted me to speak, Chase. Thank you. We actually took a pretty decent look from a conceptual standpoint at anticipated costs, and there's a lot of unknowns as it relates to utility relocations, utility replacements like the sanitary sewer, for example. But with the incorporation of roundabouts at Searly 18th and 12th, and the expansion, as you can see on the screen with the box culvert, you're correct, Councilman Sires, that there is a little bit more cost associated with the project as we would anticipate at this point. Currently in your CIP, you have 8.3 million, and we're estimating with the inclusion of the roundabouts as well as the replacement of the sewer and replacement of the water main and updating the street lighting through the corridor, we're talking a little bit under $10 million for the entire corridor. And that's for about 1.2 miles of roadway reconstruction, the sidewalk, the bike lanes, the roundabouts, and storm sewer upgrades.
And Mr. Griman, when you gave the figure for 8.3 million, that first figure, did that also include sewer and other infrastructure improvements?
I'm not sure if it did or not. We pulled that right out of the CIP.
Okay. Well, it's good. So we have some figures available. It sounds like we'd want to have that, available in a slide or in writing that we could take a look at if council desires that. So, Councilmember Harding, I saw you had your hand up.
Yep. All right. Well, I'll try to go quick since we're running short on time. I'm just gonna
About 10 minutes.
Yeah, I'm gonna list my questions out. It's a tough decision, and I'd really like to get a lot more information. So here we go. Is it possible to do a 4-lane with the single lane roundabouts? Funnel in the double lanes to do single lane roundabouts. That would be one question. Secondly, safety is definitely paramount. I don't want anyone getting hurt. My question would be on that is how much safer are we really going to make it with the 3 lanes if we're already down to 1, 5 minor injuries, possible 9? Are we looking at improving those numbers a lot? Do we have places where I could like research and read like how, I know you said the percentage was 30 or something. But is that true if we did the roundabouts at those major intersections and left them 4 lanes? It seems like the bulk of those injuries happen at the intersections. So I would wonder about that comparison. Page 20 of the presentation, which thank you for the presentation, by the way. I love getting all this information. Page 20 says there were public input on 9/13/2016 and 5/23/2017. I'm very glad that we're reaching out to the public. Is there a way that I could access and see the notes and the feedback from the public and the ideas that the public brought forward? What did the stakeholders in the area have to say about this proposal? The churches, the houses directly impacted, think about the project and how will it affect them? Is there anyone who's going to be more affected than other people by us redoing it 3-lane compared to 4-lane? I think the presentation with 3 lanes and a roundabout, it looks great. The time's lower, all this stuff, but I really would prefer a lot more information like I just listed before I feel comfortable making a large decision like this. That's
Thank you, Mr. Councilor Hardy. Councilor DeBeer, you had a hand up?
Well, yeah, if we have time. In the corridor background, it talked about correctable crashes with the rear ends being 10, broadside 8, and side swipes 4. I wanted him to explain what is a correctable crash. I'm curious on that because I thought when you talked about University Avenue, they talked about the roundabouts causing more rear end accidents. And if our current problem is rear end accidents, would we be creating more rear end accidents?
Okay, correctable crashes. I mean, the way we usually look at them is, let me give a real simple one, is a left turn crash at one of the intersections because we don't have the left turn lane. I can't see around another vehicle opposite from me because we have a 4-lane versus left turn lanes that align and I can see better around them. That's like what we'd call a correctable crash. The aligned left turn lane gives you the ability to now see better, make a better choice, get around. What we also see with the 4-lane to 3-lane is rear enders go down because, again, we don't have turning traffic, left turning traffic that typically comes to a full stop. It doesn't have to stop in what would normally, what might be a through lane that you're expecting to drive through faster. So that's a correctable crash. We see side swipes change with 4-lane to 3-lane because, again, of that thing of people are going through there and they're maybe kind of maneuvering between lanes. Up, here's a left turner, I'm going to move over, and they move back and so on. And that tends to create side swipes. We see those go down. Roundabout, the biggest thing, that we see that is such a benefit with roundabouts, and this will hopefully for Councilman Harding too, is that at intersections, the big thing we see versus a signal is the right angle crash, that we help to take those way down. Those are where we get our most serious injuries. Somebody blows through a red light, not paying attention, and we get that severe right angle crash. The roundabout would help to deter that, in that what we find is we tend to get very, very, again, people are slower. So if they do hit, it's kind of plastic and material that's damaged, not people. So those are kind of the correctable ones that we see. Rear enders, where those tend to come in is when we also have a capacity problem where demand is much higher than our ability to serve it with whatever we have out there, whether it be 2 lanes, 3 lanes, 4 lanes, a traffic signal, stop sign. And so with rear enders, you may see those with roundabouts in that people proceed into it. One person is maybe yielding to somebody and the other person's looking the other way. And they may, sometimes they have that with just a right turn. Somebody thinks the car in front of them went, they start to pull forward, and they hit the other vehicle. So, there's no doubt you change some characteristics, but overall I can state, we will get the most benefit at the intersections with the roundabouts. you're going to see a crash reduction. I couldn't agree with you all more that the good news for this corridor is we don't have a terribly high, severe crash problem or severe injury problem. That is a good thing. We're just saying we can take that potential down even more with these treatments in what you would do. So I hope I answered that. If there's something further, Councilwoman DeBerg, I can add to that.
Well, it showed that we were below average and had one serious. So, I mean,
Yeah.
Obviously it's functioning well with the 4-lane. And I just had thought I recalled them saying that with the roundabouts, we got more rear end accidents. And my concern was if the biggest problem we have on the road now is rear end accidents, if we add roundabouts, you're going to have even more. The other thing I was concerned about was previously when this was discussed, they told us it was about $1 million per intersection for the roundabout. And they said Searly Boulevard couldn't be done. Well, now you're suggesting it can be, but I'm guessing that it would be quite a bit additional over that million. And I'd like to know how much are you talking?
Mr. Mayor.
And just before that, for Mr. Parrington, is that an answer that you could provide an estimate on, or would you want to wait for that?
Well, I'd first just real quick comment. I know I stood before all of you and only talked about one roundabout in the corridor, and we talked about there was maybe some potential at 18th. We talked about one at 12th, one at 18th. We had the opportunity with time to take a better look at the culvert down there, and because we knew that was a big aspect to it, of looking at it as culvert versus it being treated as a bridge, and some opportunity there. And the other point was the context I wanted to make about we know just the overall acceptance and idea of how do I drive a roundabout, how do I maneuver one, and people seeing the efficiency. We know there's a greater, as they're built, we've seen it. I think we've kind of heard about it in your community too. There's a lot of people who now, 4-lane to 3-lane, same way. Before it's built, there's a lot of fears about some of these things. But we have the data that proves how much better some of these things work. And then once they're built, I think people see that, wow, the efficiencies of one of my points with the roundabout is maybe not the peak hour of the day or the couple peak hours, but all the other hours of the day that allows it to just flow really quickly. And there's just no stopping, having to stop and just wait for a signal to change. As far as the cost, I know Wade looked at that in some more detail. And something key that I would say before I let Wade comment a little more is that a key thing to remember is our assumption in this corridor with the reconstruction is that all of it is getting rebuilt. So it's not as if the intersections, the curb, the pavement underneath, it's deteriorating. There's been a lot of overlay patching done near the fire station 18th. The assumption is there that it's all getting rebuilt. So it's all new pavement. It's whether we put it in the shape of what it is today or whether you do the shape like a roundabout. And Wade, do you want to comment any more on the cost you looked at?
I sure can. Thank you. We didn't compare directly the cost of the roundabouts against what it would be for a 3-lane intersection with upgraded traffic signals per se, but that is definitely something that we can put together as a cost comparison for the city. I can say that just to echo what Mark had mentioned about the twin box culvert on the south leg of Searly, we really didn't know a lot from the structural integrity of that facility. And since the study was wrapped up till today, we have a better understanding of what those structural I would say characteristics of that twin box are, and it can be just simply extended to allow for additional pavement over top. So that really simplifies some of our initial concerns and mitigates some of those concerns from our original recommendation where we were proposing a signal in the first place. So.
Okay, thank you. And we are at 6:50 now, so I want to be respectful of the time here. We don't necessarily need a motion tonight. One of the things that could come out of this is council motion to move forward with one of the design proposals or one of the options. So the design proposal could be built in the coming months. Time-wise, we do have some time available to revisit this before having to make that decision. So without necessarily needing a motion, would any council members object to having a follow-on committee of the whole meeting in the near future, maybe to discuss some of the input that came from the public in the design phase, have some of that presented, and then some of these other questions answered? Would anyone object to that?
Mr. Mayor, I like that idea to continue the discussion, particularly bike accidents that we got to input into this.
That'd be, if you don't mind, I'd like to just ask a question too. To Daryl's point, you said we had a lot of public input. What was the level of involvement from the bicycle task force or that group? I know there's concern about bicycle safety and stuff, but I had the impression that riding on a 3-lane is just as safe as riding on a 4-lane. But what was their involvement in the initial fact finding? Anybody know?
Mayor, I can comment real quick. I know that they attended our meetings, members of that group. I'd have to go back and look at some specific notes, Councilman Dara, of their input, but I know that they, like I said, they attended our public meetings and provided input. The other, along those lines of the public input, within our final report that I don't know if it's on the city website, but the staff has it. We have an appendix that includes all the comments and input, the written comments and input that we received from everybody. So there's a lot of information there from all of those people of their comments at the time. So we could look into that more.
Okay, thank you. So with that too, a meeting through committee of the whole to continue discussion of this, I believe it would be warranted to have some additional time. So we had 60 minutes for this one, and it might make sense to even have 70, 80, 90 minutes. So we can also include maybe a public comment section in there as well, since we weren't able to get to that tonight.
That's great.
Yes, please.
It might be helpful to also add the traffic count numbers that they had previously when they did this, because they also had number of bicycles that they saw on the corridor in that study. And I think that it's important for the people to see that number, because it was excessively low.
Certainly. And I'd like to see with the numbers that you have up until 2017, I'd like to see that extended out, since it's been 4 years, up to the current time, if that's possible. If there's an additional cost to that, let us know.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Harding, and this will be the last comment.
Yeah, I'm not going to ask them a question. I don't want to take up anybody's time, but I have been writing down all my questions, and I know I probably have a lot of them. Is there a central location where I can just send all my questions so that everybody can see them, and then maybe those could be incorporated into the next presentation possibly? Should I email them to staff, Snyder, you?
How about send this to Mr. Gaines, and then he can get those out to...
Or myself. That's fine.
Okay, I'll CC. Okay, perfect. Just wanted to know where to send them, and that way we can all be on the same page. Thanks.
Okay, and same for the rest of council. If you have additional questions you want asked, you can send that to Director Shaggy and just CC Mr. Gaines and myself if you could. All right, thank you very much. Excellent discussion. And we are at 6:53, so we'll give Channel 15 time to reset. So this meeting's adjourned, and we will look to pick up again at the top of the hour.
Thanks.
Thanks for a great presentation.
Yeah.